again, the way we tend to think of energy transition markets is exactly what I was talking about. Through 2030, through 2035, you're not going to see 25, 30% of the hydrogen market getting replaced by green hydrogen, but you're going to see 1 million tons, a couple million tons. There'll be these end-use cases. There'll be maybe a semiconductor manufacturing facility, and we're going to see a lot of semiconductor manufacturing capacity come into the US because of the CHIPS Act. But you'll see these small plants that buy liquefied hydrogen at $3, $4, and they're going to instead go for an electrolyzer that'll produce that green hydrogen. It's not going to be $1 a kilogram, but it'll be maybe a couple bucks. But they are still paying a little bit less than what they are paying to liquefied, to have access to liquefied hydrogen. So it's essentially going to be these kind of niche markets that will evolve over the next few years that will drive. Sustainable aviation fuel, you should talk to, again, Panusvi Dwivedi and Maria Lopez here. They are leading our work on sustainable aviation fuel. We're seeing a tremendous number of announcements on sustainable aviation fuel. This is purely demand-driven. The airlines can't get enough of sustainable aviation fuel supply today. Yesterday, United Airlines and a bunch of their customers announced a $100 million fund. A lot of the oil and gas majors are actively thinking of commercializing interesting technologies, building plants, and this is a stack up of what that looks like. Of course, 6.5 billion gallons of sustainable aviation fuel through 2026 is nothing. It's less than 0.5% of the overall jet fuel market. But this is demand driven, so if there are interesting technologies that are being developed, we'll see a lot of new capacity come up here. A lot of interest in and around geothermal. A lot of people don't know us, but our earliest client, one of our earliest clients was the Department of Energy, the Geothermal Technologies Office. We did a piece of work for them for it was a 3-year-long project where we looked at how can geothermal technology advance by learning from the oil and gas industry. So we looked at how the cost of drilling, completions, building surface power plants in geothermal, both hydrothermal resources and engineered geosystems, engineered geothermal systems, how can they reduce costs? And one of the big applications that we identified as part of that work was how you can cut the cost of the break-even cost of geothermal energy by leveraging existing or old oil and gas wells. And that's the break-even on the chart on the right. If you want to build a greenfield geothermal plant today, that's 35 cents a kilowatt hour. Nobody's going to buy power from you at that price, irrespective of how clean it is. The price on the Gulf Coast today is 6 to 7 cents. People like Dow, they were telling us yesterday, buy it at 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour because, so this is 10x that. Nobody's going to buy geothermal power from you at that price point. But if you could potentially leverage existing oil and gas wells, you're going to cut the cost down by 2/3, potentially get to that 10 cents a kilowatt hour where the carbon benefits are potentially convincing for some customers to go buy that power. What is interesting is that geothermal technology development follows very closely federal dollars that are allocated to it. We did a ton of work in geothermal, leveraging ARA funds in 2009, 10, 11, when I just started ADI. And then it disappeared. And then now we have a lot of federal funds coming back into the market again, and therefore you're seeing interesting startups. So we are concerned that a lot of this is driven by federal dollars that are available as opposed to true sustained demand for geothermal power. Let me skip this. The last piece is direct air capture, right? I think if you had asked me last year, I would have said it's one of the stupidest ideas out there and this curve kind of shows that. It is the far end of the cost stack, and it makes no sense to go look at it. But since then, we have done a lot of work, right? And I think we have changed our mind, right? I think the way markets work, and we underestimate the way, as analysts, markets work because we look at a chart and we look at the numbers and say, well, nobody's going to do this. But sometimes what markets want is an easy solution. It might be a little bit more expensive, or it might be even the most expensive. But if it is easy, there could be adoption for that. And that's what direct air capture does, right? It's an easy solution in people's minds. You go and build a facility, it'll capture CO2 from air, and even if it's a little bit expensive, that works. All the direct air capture companies that we have been talking to are all funded to a large extent by the large tech companies who are under a lot of pressure to demonstrate their ability to decarbonize their data centers and other operations. And I think that's the reason why we are seeing so much interest. But then as we've gone and had conversations with these technology developers, of course, there are a few people out there who are committing things that we don't think are achievable. But there are also some very interesting, reasonable players who are saying, yeah, it costs $700-800 a ton today, but we think it can come down. This is why we think it can come down. I mean, one of the companies that we talked to said the same thing. They told us a year back, we thought this was the stupidest idea. But somebody came and wrote a check to us, and we started working on this, and we think that, okay, there is the possibility of doing something here. And so I think, I probably am revising my view on DAC, that it could potentially have a role here. A lot of companies that are active in CO2 conversion, if you were here yesterday, you would have heard that this is the next stupidest thing to do probably after DAC. But there's a lot of interesting ideas that are going in CO2 conversion. We have done a lot of work in this space. What is interesting is that some of these CO2 conversion technologies, and I'm going to speed through here because we are running behind, but some of these CO2 conversion companies are actually finding investments for their first commercial scale plant, which is the most interesting piece. This is a list of companies that have announced commercial manufacturing plans, and the x-axis shows the scale of investment that they have raised. And the y-axis shows the source of that capital. And what is interesting is that you have players like LanzaTech who are taking industrial off-gases and converting that into ethanol, and they have been funded purely by corporate dollars. These guys are getting money from their customers to go build a $200 million, $100 million, $150 million plant. But then if you look at the far right, there are players like Arbor Renewable Gas and Carbon Engineering who are building $1 billion plant. These are first-of-a-kind plants, tremendous amount of technology risk, but there is capital flowing there. So, which we think is an encouraging sign for a lot of these energy transition technologies.